Hello, folks. Thank you for tuning in on today's show. Trump once again suspended on Facebook. Fauci emails show that I ended up being right all along, as always. Iran is rearming Hamas to continue to wage war against Israel. Jobs report from May, another disappointment with rising inflation. And finally, a high school girl calls for abortion rights in her high school graduation speech. All of this and much more on today's episode of the Federalist Files.
The joint session of Congress, according to the intelligence community, terrorism from white supremacy is the most lethal threat to the homeland today. Not ISIS, not Al-Qaeda, white supremacists.
It's amazing, folks. It's amazing how far the left will continue to grab at the race narrative, the race hustlers in the Democrat Party. They continue to wage the war against the imaginary enemy of the far, the right-wing extremist white supremacists. Last time they had this Unite the Right rally that they had, I think it was about a year ago, there was actually more press there than there were people actually in the event. So when we held this giant event for the white supremacists, white nationalists to show up, I think about 20 people in the entire country showed up. So they can continue to perpetuate this idea that white supremacy is a huge issue in this country. Yeah, is it an issue? Yeah, I'm sure it probably is, but if you had to tell me what's the top 100 issues in this country, I probably wouldn't even put white supremacy in the top 100. Joe Biden and the Democrat Party just continues to roll with this because it's the only thing. Anything that you disagree with them on, they'll just call you they'll call you racist, they'll call you homophobic. It's just another way to attack you, another way to discredit you as a dissenter to what the main opinion is, because they know, once again, as Democrats, they run on all of their ideas sucking and having no value or foundation to them. So they'll continue to run against you and try to discredit you as a person because that is their only debate, because they know their ideas suck. I think they even personally know that their ideas suck. It's just this idea that they want to implement some sort of totalitarian control, and they're already in a position in government where they really have so much capital and wealth that's been created from them working in that position through insider deals and lobbying, that it really doesn't matter what they do to you, the people, as long as they're able to hold power for extended periods of time. So that was Joe Biden. He gave a speech over the weekend in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to talk about I think it was in 1921, Black Wall Street got burned to the ground by a bunch of white supremacists and KKK members. So we're coming on the 100-year anniversary of that. That's what he was there for, to give a speech. And then he also met with some leaders that were not involved, but they were, I guess, alive for the event, for it happening. 3 people, all obviously, because it was 100 years ago, between the ages of 101 and 107. So this is how far the left is reaching for things. They're reaching for white supremacy. They're showing up to events where the people are hundreds of years old, are over 100 years old. That's how far displaced we are from this event, that the people are over 100 years old that he's meeting with, and they're probably the only people left from that era. And we're still reaching for this. And what the real question to this is Joe Biden has been in the Senate for 40 years. Or he's been in government for 40 years. Why is it that now, for the first time, he's now addressing this problem that happened? And I'm not going to sit here and say it didn't happen. I don't know much about it. I haven't read into it much. From what I understand, the Democrats who created the Ku Klux Klan walked down there and pretty much burned the entire city to the ground. Anything having to do with black-owned businesses, because they were successful. And apparently these dudes that showed up, these racist dudes that showed up, were pissed off because these other people were successful and they were another race. So you're going to also have Joe Biden in the same exact speech. He's going to continue to talk about this and this white supremacy issue at this time, and he continues to mention and characterize these individuals as KKK members, but notice, and then he goes on to kind of explain how many were in the government at this time in the 1920s. But then the one thing that he leaves out is who they were. were they Democrats or were they Republicans? What party affiliation did these KKK members in the government have? What party were they in? Play clip 5.
And most people didn't realize that a century ago, the second Ku Klux Klan had been founded. The second Ku Klux Klan had been founded. A friend of mine, John Meacham, I'd written when I said I was running to restore the soul of America. He wrote a book called The Soul of America, not because of what I said. And there's a picture about page 160 in the book showing over 30,000 Ku Klux Klan members in full regalia, Reverend. Pointed hats, the robes, marching down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., Jesse, you know all about this. Washington, D.C. If my memory is correct, there were 37 members of the House of Representatives who were open members of the Klan. There were 5, if I'm not mistaken, could have been 7, I think it was 5 members of the United States Senate, open members of the Klan. Multiple governors were open members of the Klan. Most people didn't realize that a century ago the Klan was founded just 6 years before the horrific destruction here in Tulsa.
So I don't know if y'all were able to hear exactly in the very... when he says there's 35 representatives that were in the House, you heard someone yell in the background, "Preach!" Which I don't know why. Why is someone cheering for the fact that there was 35 members in the House of Representatives in 1921 that were Ku Klux Klan members? Who the heck is cheering for that? And then before this, I forgot to mention in the initial opening video, when he said white supremacy, everybody started clapping. Like, why are we praising white supremacy? Why are we praising people being KKK members? It just seems like this whole thing was just so played out, and it was just so what's the word? I mean, it was just pre-planned. It was orchestrated, the way in which he was orating this time, and people are yelling in the background, "Preach," and they're happy about it. But the more important thing is, notice how Joe Biden will not confront the fact that the KKK was created by the Democrat Party. It has deep roots in the Democrat base from the very inception of the Democrat Party. And they are the core creators of the Ku Klux Klan. They're also the creators of Planned Parenthood because they wanted to practice eugenics, and they wanted to kill as many black people as they possibly could. That's the reason why they put Planned Parenthoods in black neighborhoods. This is all objective reality. There's tons of history on this. The Democrat Party still will continue. They're not going to confront the problem. What they are doing now is they continue to project and say what party was the racist party, and they continue to point at the Republican Party. Not that I'm a huge fan of Republicans, but the Democrat Party also, on record, has, if you ever notice, Hillary Clinton, when she went on the Breakfast Club, she pulls out her hot sauce, and then she comes out with twangy Southern accents whenever she talks to black crowds. Kamala Harris actually did the exact same thing just last week. She was twanging with like a weird Southern accent. And then when she went on Breakfast Club, she did the same thing. They try to appeal to black audiences by attempting to communicate that they have some sort of cultural similarities to the black audiences rather than just being themselves. And then by doing that, they fall straight on their face because they have nothing similar in black culture, because they don't listen to that type of music, or they don't, carry hot sauce in their purse. She had that hot sauce in her purse. She probably had the label on it, everything. It was probably never even opened before. It's just really, it is amazing what the Democrats, how far they'll reach just to attempt to call other people racist when there is no circumspection from their party of history and historically what they themselves have done in their party. And I'm not a party politics guy. Everybody, if you've been listening to this show for a while, you understand that you have the base. I am generally far right, further right than the Republican Party, to the point where I don't agree with the social safety net system. I don't agree with Social Security. I don't really even agree to an extent in the way in which we delve out our unemployment benefits. I think there needs to be some sort of set-up system, kind of like in Florida, how they have it currently, where you need to show that you applied to jobs and you went to interviews and you did all these things and you're actively attempting to get a job, to get some sort of unemployment benefit. But we don't have that system here. The government just delves out money to whoever. So that's Biden looking like a joke. I have one more clip of Biden, and it really is, man. They really... Anyone that understands the way that history works and the founding of this country, the way in which they constructed the Constitution, some of our framers, they understand every single time that Biden is like a walking representation of mediocrity and hypocrisy at the same time. He embodies both of those things. So when he goes out and he talks about the KKK, talks about this and that, it's like your best friend was Robert Byrd. You gave a eulogy at his funeral, and he was a KKK member. He was actually pretty, I think he was like a grand wizard, whatever the freak that means. I don't even know what any of these things, to me, they're dorky Dungeons and Dragons characters that they played out in their minds, I guess, and then they kind of like, ooh, it was like that weird thing that you would do. It was your hobby. You'd go hang out with your weird friends and burn a couple crosses. It was just such a weird time in history. But apparently this guy was like a grand wizard of the KKK, and then, what's his name? Biden goes up there, gives a little eulogy at his funeral, whatever. He's known for all of that. He's also said very racist things before, and now he's kind of walking it all back, playing it. The question is now you're 78 years old. Now you're going to walk back all of your comments because now it is expedient for you politically to do so. So I have another one, once again, Memorial Day speech. He invokes our founding fathers of Lexington, Concord, and just listen to the way in which he kind of continues to compare throughout history, historically, how America was kind of made. Play 8.
Freedom. The Americans of Lexington and Concord, of New Orleans, Gettysburg, the Argonne, Iwo Jima, Normandy, Korea and Vietnam, Afghanistan and Iraq, and thousands of places in between. These Americans weren't fighting for dictators. They were fighting for democracy. They weren't fighting to exclude or to enslave. They were fighting to build and broaden and liberate. They weren't fighting for self. They were fighting for the soul of the nation, for liberty and simple fair play. Simple fair play and decency.
Just to begin with, the Democrats always kind of end their speeches. He uses those two terms, decency, fair play, very often. Once again, democracy. The country, this is a constitutional republic. Once again, for the 5 millionth time, it is not a democracy. Additionally, if you want to invoke the patriots of Lexington, Concord, the Sons of Liberty, those dudes would overthrow the government right now today. So I don't even know. I love when they draw these comparisons. You currently run a tyrannical, oppressive regime as the president of the United States under your power, where you're taxing people to hell. You're printing more money, devaluing the currency. You're devaluing their bank account. And then you're not allowing for jobs right now because you're not allowing for anything to be open. I mean, now we're kind of starting to open the economy back up. You are giving such crazy unemployment benefits that really what you're doing is you're robbing everybody that's working currently right now, and you're paying everybody else out. You're redistributing their wealth. If the framers of the Constitution, some of those patriots that were involved in Lexington, Concord, Battle of Gettysburg, even up until really World War II at this point, if that was going on at that time, you would be overthrown as the dictating power. So this guy here, he's invoking people that would actively overthrow him in the presidency. There is no doubt in my mind that that's what would have happened. Because this government has become way too powerful, way too centralized, way too big, and impeding on everyone's life. And I always think it's very funny when the Democrats go forward and they love to propagate this idea of democracy that was built through our founders and through our framers of our Constitution, as if you in your position, you shouldn't even mention any of their names because you guys hate America so much. Don't even mention these people's names because the principles that they stood for years ago, you no longer represent. You have looked to eradicate them, and you have been diminishing them incrementally over the last 100 years. So get to my next topic. I have Fauci's, and once again, I was correct on this. I have, in the very inception of this podcast, I went out, I created all my social media accounts. I put just a stupid meme up there about Fauci, and I got so much backlash and so much hate, and I didn't really understand because I haven't been in the ethos at that time So I don't understand. These people are actually this stupid that they believe this Fauci guy to be some sort of saint and he should be exalted and listened to all the time. That's what I thought. So I said, oh, okay. So I got to put together a podcast just wrecking Fauci and how inconsistent he's been on the data this entire time. So I believe this happened December 24th. It was Christmas Eve. And then I want to say 2 or 3 days later, December maybe 27th or 28th, I came out with my video, it was a full hour of Fauci. The entire video talking about the statistics, the studies, the data, him on this date, how he has flip-flopped consistently. And he's actually continued to flip-flop. I mean, that's about 6 months ago. He's continued to do so as things have transpired throughout that time. I have some emails, BuzzFeed. They got them in a Freedom of Information Act request. And I just think it's funny because I mentioned this, I fought pretty hard, and now none of these leftist loser hacks that love to, attack my credibility this entire time. No one has come to me and been like, yeah, man, you were right. I'm not going to blame you. Just say it straight up. I was right this entire time. I made a video about it. I made an hour and a half video or an hour and 5 minute video. The flip-flopping from Fauci to show how inconsistent he is and pretty much just he has no credibility at this point especially. And I've still yet to have any of these lefties come up and say, but you know why, folks? Because they don't even know how news is coming out. They probably have no idea that this is even a story. Because they're just that ill-informed. They're so misinformed. It's astonishing. So, Fauci, BuzzFeed, once again, Freedom of Information Act requested some emails, which surprised me that BuzzFeed even did so. But, good on them that they did. There's a bunch of emails. I'm going to leave it in the show notes. As always, everything I refer to will be in the description below. It'll be under the tab show notes. This one will be titled Fauci's BuzzFeed Freedom of Information Act requested emails. There's a bunch of emails here. There was some of them coming from some of Fauci's friends telling him and other doctors telling him to shut down the economy further and further, shut down everything. I'm not working as a doctor so other people can go and drink beer and hang out with their friends. I'm risking my life every single day. I swear, folks, these are the emails that he was getting back and forth from some of these people, random people that are just random doctors that somehow found him through email. So what I have here, first one I got, this is from Anthony Fauci going to Kai Cooper Schmidt, okay? He said, error, and I guess this was an email. He had to modify his email before and clarify. He said, Kai, the person that he's emailing, he said, error in my statement to you. I meant to say, and I quote, most transmissions occur from someone who is symptomatic, not asymptomatic. I am really tired, not much sleep these days. Best, Tony. So that was February 5th, 2020. That was kind of in the very beginning of some of this COVID stuff. And Fauci pretty much saying is, okay, it's rare. You're not going to get something from someone that's asymptomatic. Most of the transmissions are going to come from somebody that is symptomatic. I just want to clarify my statements. That's what he said in the email. So he has said now that, no, asymptomatic people can catch it. And there's a risk, and we need to stay inside. Even if you've had it before, you could still have asymptomatic spread. Even if you don't have it, you could be asymptomatic and you could spread it to people. So pretty much just scaring the hell out of everybody in the country. Here's another one that I have. This is to Sylvia Burwell. A couple of quick questions from Dr. Fauci. He said, Sylvia, masks are really for infected people to prevent them from spreading infection to people who are not infected rather than protecting uninfected people from acquiring infection. The typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out virus, which is small enough to pass through the material. It might, however, provide some slight benefit to keep out gross droplets if someone coughs or sneezes on you. I do not recommend that you wear a mask, particularly since you are going to a very low-risk location. Your instincts are correct. Money is best spent on medical countermeasures such as diagnostics and vaccines. Safe travels. Best regards, Tony. So here's him openly admitting, this is on February 5th, 2020. Here is him openly admitting that masks do not work. The only way that they would work is for droplets, which everybody knew that already. So he's now admitting that the virus goes through the masks in this email. And he has consistently said that that's not the case. So here's another one that I got. And this one is probably, Oh, yeah, okay. So this one is from Christian G. Anderson. Now, I looked up Christian G. Anderson. He's a researcher. I guess he does some sort of analyst, some data analysis about viruses. So he's emailing Tony Fauci. He said, "Hi, Tony. Thanks for sharing. Yes, I saw this earlier today, and both Eddie and myself are actually quoted in it. It's a great article, but the problem is that our phylogenetic analyses aren't able to answer whether the sequences are unusual at individual residues, except if they are completely off. On a phylogenetic genetic tree, the virus looks totally normal, and the close clustering with bats suggests that bats serve as the reservoir. The unusual features of the virus, and this is the most important part, the unusual features of the virus make up a really small part of the genome. So one has to look really closely at all sequences to see that some of the features potentially look engineered, saying that this was modified, this was engineered in some sort of a laboratory or something of that nature. This isn't something that is naturally occurring in nature." And this was sent on Friday, January 31st, 2020. So Tony Fauci consistently was getting information, and he was also himself speaking counter narrative to what he was coming out and telling the public whenever he was on a news station being interviewed. It really is. This dude should be in prison. He should have been fired from his job a long time ago, and he should currently now be in prison because we have 40% of small businesses are now shut down because of a guy like this, a tyrant like this, and all that Tony Fauci cares about at the end of the day for him, it is to continue his career and is continue the bureaucracy from which he is in. He is all about defending the bureaucracy. That is the reason he has his position. So he has to justify his position being there. The longer and longer this plays out, the more justified his position, as well as his entire department, the NIID or whatever the hell they're called. As long as he continues to be out there on TV, they continue to have some sort of relevance, and it looks like they are needed and they are necessary to operations in the government. And that is at the end of the day, he's just a bureaucrat that is protecting his position, and he's also protecting the position of his department as well. This one may be the worst one out of all of the emails. And this shows definite manipulation, or at least alleged manipulation by Facebook. So you had Mark Zuckerberg just cold send him an email, just randomly out of the blue. This wasn't, conducted. He didn't set up any interviews with him or anything like that. Sends him an email. He thanks him for his leadership, all this other stuff. He wants to make sure that they get authoritative information, reliable sources, encourage people to practice social distancing, and give people ideas for doing this, for using the internet tools. So he's pretty much saying, hey, we're gonna help, and we're gonna try to inform the audience. We're gonna try to let everybody know how this is gonna go. We're gonna do our media misinformation scheme scandal that we do with our fact checkers. And then he talks about live streaming Q&As with health experts, all that other stuff, whatever, what have you. Now, the redacted part. So the government released these emails, but they redacted two parts. One part to this email, and then another part to the second email talking about this email. So he says, finally, at the very end, and it redacts about 4 lines, about a paragraph worth of writing. So you think, what is, this is a proposition. That's what this is. And you say, how is this a proposition? So beforehand, he said, this isn't public information yet, but we're building a coronavirus information hub that we're going to put at the top of Facebook for everyone, which is 2.5 billion people worldwide, 200 million Americans, with 2 goals. Make sure people can get authoritative information from reliable sources and encourage people to practice social distancing and give people ideas for doing this using internet tools. This will be live within the next 48 hours. Oh, this is even more interesting. As a central part of this hub, I think it would be useful to include a video from you because people trust and want to hear from experts rather than just a bunch of agencies and political leaders. This could be done in a number of formats if you're open to it. So to begin with, he is a political leader. He's definitely from an agency for sure, if you don't want to call him a political leader, but he's a political symbol, of course, because he's been propagated by the media this entire time. But at the very end, you say finally, he says finally, boom, 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 boom. But right before he says that, he's talking about 100 million followers to get authoritative information out as well. So finally, whatever. So he has his redacted section, as you can see in the picture. It's about a paragraph long. So the next email he gets, and this is from Courtney Billette. I guess she's some sort of a secretary. So she sends Fauci an email letting him know about this exactly. She goes, oh, per email below, Mark Zuckerberg has extended a few offers to do videos with you that we would be happy to seek clearance on for you to do so, if you are amenable, meaning if you want to. These would have the weight and impact of television, really more so. Please advise if you want to do, and we will seek clearance with VP office and work with Patty to sort out the logistics. Okay, so this is the more interesting part. She says, but an even bigger deal is his offer, and then it's a full line gets redacted. And then it says, the sooner we get that offer up the food chain, the better. So what is this offer? Is this offer to cut down people that they don't think is authoritative, take people off of the network, kick people off the network that they think is spreading what they would call misinformation? Does this have anything to do with the fact checkers, getting the fact checkers involved with somehow the NIH? We don't know now. I'm thinking, and she said, I gave Bill Hall a heads up about this opportunity, but I don't exactly know who Bill Hall is. But to me, this looks very fishy. To me, this looks like a cover-up. This looks like Facebook was coordinating with Dr. Fauci on who to take off, what to recognize as authoritative sources, who to throttle, and who to take down their posts. I actually just recently, my Facebook page, they dinged my Facebook page because there was a quote that I put up, and it was something that Adolf Hitler said, and it's something that sounds like it came straight out of the Democrat Party's playbook. And when I read that, I said, oh, this is very interesting. This sounds like, I put up the picture and I said, this sounds just like the Democrat Party. And of course, a day later, get it taken down for hate symbols and hate speech, whatever. There's no hate speech involved. I can't even remember what the quote is now off the top of my head. No hate speech involved. But it's just, it has similar formats and ideology to the Democrat Party. And that's really at the end of the day, that's why it got taken down. It has nothing to do with what it says. Because there's no hateful speech involved. Just because the person they think is hateful automatically means the speech is hateful. If that's the case, then we should be taking down anything with Michael Jackson in it because he had... There were some things with molestation of little boys, some allegations with that as well. Or Stalin, anything with Stalin involved, anything with anybody that did any wrong to society, you can't ever put any type of picture up of them then at that point, if that's what we're doing now. Which really, it's all just infringements on freedom of speech. So after all this came out, you have Dr. Fauci goes on MSNBC, which is very surprising to me that he even showed his face on MSNBC, but he goes on there and just listen to the softball, really, that he gets from the anchor on MSNBC. Play 9.
Well, the true mark of someone is if they look good, even when their personal emails come out. So you passed the test that very few of us would pass. Dr. Anthony Fauci, thank you for spending some time with us today talking about all of it. We're always grateful to get some of your time.
That clip's about 3 minutes long. I cut it very shortly, and I'm just going to explain. So beforehand, Fauci explained why he changed his opinion so many times. He says science is something that is malleable. It's always changing, which is true. It's a true statement. But he's changing his opinions and things that are considered scientifically already set in standard. There's already standards set for it, such as having a vaccination, you create antibodies. Usually you're immune to whatever disease or whatever virus you got that vaccination for a set period of time. Usually that's the set standard for something. That's why you get the flu shot every single year. Usually it gives you at least a year of immunity. Okay. What he did was, in the very beginning, he said, we don't need to wear masks. They're useless. Then he changed his opinion. We all need to wear masks all the time. We need to wear 2 masks now. Now we don't need to wear masks again. And these are things that were never created. There was no information that came out that should have changed his mind. There was nothing. There was no studies, no empirical data, as he says. None of that came out that should have changed his mind one way or the other. So now what he's doing is he's backtracking, just saying, well, I'm just going with the science. He's just going with whatever the CDC says. He kind of just mimics and says the same thing because he wants to keep his position. This dude, all he has cared about is holding his power and holding his position where it is. It is fantastical that people even believe anything from that this dude spews. This other article that I found very interesting, former CDC director, I think his name's Robert Redfield. He was threatened for proposing the lab theory that we talked about these last couple of podcasts. This Daily Mail piece is written by Christopher Eberhardt. He was threatened and ostracized, is what he said. He received death threats from scientist colleagues after he publicly said he believed COVID-19 originated in a lab. So this guy also, this is another dude that's CDC, he's been all over the place. He said the mask is the most important tool to use, and then until they get vaccinations, he's kind of been all over the place as well. And then I guess he ended up stepping down or getting fired, whatever. So he was in a CNN interview when he stated this, that he said that the coronavirus was made in a lab and he thought it escaped. Since then, he said he received death threats by fellow scientists, including some he used to call friends. He told Vanity Fair. So he said he expected that kind of behavior from politicians, but he didn't expect it from scientists. Which, I mean, scientists nowadays in the government are pretty much politicians as well. I just thought that was interesting. That was worth mentioning. Additionally, China is now reporting this bird flu H1N3. This is from the AP, the Associated Press. 41-year-old man in Jiangsu province, which is northwest of Shanghai. If anybody knows what a Chinese map even looks like. This strain of bird flu, large-scale spread, is low apparently, but this strain of bird flu they found in a 41-year-old man. He was hospitalized with it, and the article states, but unlike corona, so just to, I just want to keep this on the record so we know. So if somehow the government makes a huge deal out of this, like they did with coronavirus, we can go back to this article in a year and a half from now and we can see how big the frauds are from the CDC. And then once again, we'll do this whole thing all over again, revolving door type action. I'll do the old, what is it when you know you've already walked through something before? I forget the word for it now. But we'll do this all over a year and a half from now, because they're gonna, if they try to somehow push this new bird flu like they did with coronavirus, but we'll see. But it says, but unlike with coronaviruses, there are global influenza surveillance systems that watch for human cases of bird flu, since a strain called H5N1 cropped up in the late 1990s in Hong Kong's crowded live poultry markets, pretty much damaging all of their poultry. Between 2013 and 2017, another bird flu called H7N9 infected more than 1,500 people in China through close contact with infected chickens. With that history, authorities aren't surprised to see occasional human cases of various bird flu strains, and they monitor closely for any signs one is spreading between people. So they're saying, though, but this has a very low the large-scale spread, the ability for it to, the transmissibility rate is just very low. It's not as possible, just because I think it's a strain that comes from a bird specifically, unlike coronavirus, which was created in a lab. It was genetically modified to make it much highly transmissible, unlike this here. But we'll see what ends up happening with that. We'll keep an eye on it, because in the next year and a half, if the government decides to make a huge deal out of this, crash the economy, cost millions of people their jobs like they just did the last year and a half, then we'll have this eye on this, and I'll be able to point back and reference this time. So Iran's rearming Hamas with thousands of rockets. This is a Washington Free Beacon piece. This is incredible. It's written by Adam Credo. Just the words, just the... What's being espoused right now by Hamas as well as Iran is extremely bullish for war. We have this guy, Fathi Hamad, a member of Hamas's political bureau, was quoted as saying over the Memorial Day weekend by Iran's state-run Fars news agency. This is what he had to say, and I quote, With the end of the Israeli regime's latest aggression, the Palestinian resistance has resumed the process of rocket production. Our factories and workshops have restarted producing thousands of rockets to stop Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu intransigence in Al-Quds, Jerusalem, and Tel Aviv. Al-Quds, I think, is their military, I believe. The special forces from the Israelis, I think. So Hamas leaders also said that despite the current calm between the sides, the war will last forever, is what the Hamas leaders are saying. Iranian leaders have made clear in recent days that they will continue arming and funding Hamas, comments that have stoked outrage among Republicans in Congress. Many U.S. lawmakers are pressing the Biden administration to abandon its diplomacy with Iran, aimed at inking a new Iran deal. They say that the billions of dollars in sanctions relief the United States will give Iran will go to funding terror proxy groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, which also fired rockets at Israel during the most recent conflict. I didn't know that Hezbollah was also shooting them. Yeah, I mean, this will just continue. This will just continue, and if the Biden administration's not going to stand up to the regime over there, then it's not going to make a difference. But we have Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar also made some comments over the weekend how they're going to continue to attack Israel, and he stated, and I quote, "The option of war against Israel and its discriminatory measures against the Palestinians is still here. Palestinians are not after war because it carries heavy costs. However, this war will last forever because Israel has occupied our lands, displaced our people, and continues to engage in carnage." So, Iranian military leader also praised Hamas's strikes on Israel and pledged to support the group's mission to destroy the Jewish state. Iranian Defense Minister Brigadier General Amir Hatami said on Sunday that with Iran's help, Hamas's missile arsenal has turned into a nightmare for the Zionists, as in the Jews, according to the separate report in Fars News. And this is what he also had to say, additionally, Hatami. "The Zionist regime will not see the next 25 years, and from now on, missiles, drones, and the defense capabilities of the real owners of Palestine will be the nightmare of the usurper settlers." Major General Hassan Salami, which is a hilarious name, Hassan Salami, commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, also said on Sunday, they're also a terrorist group, by the way, also said on Sunday that the most recent war with Israel showed that Hamas's arsenal is more powerful than ever. He said, "The recent war has imposed a powerful Palestine on the Zionist regime's calculations. The Palestinians will grow stronger day by day, and the Israelis should know that they will not be able to live beside an enemy which enjoys a great power now." A great power now. So, man, long story short, Hamas, Iran, which everybody knew, Iran was supplying Hamas. Now it comes out Iran is supplying Hamas with the missiles, which I've stated before. I mean, these are all things I'm always vindicated, it seems like, and it really doesn't take much to be vindicated. I used to listen to other people's podcasts, and I used to say, man, how does he know what's going to happen in the future? It's really not me knowing it's just the person reads it. There's rumblings in the intelligence community. Some reputable sources are reporting it, and it just ends up happening. Iran is happy that Hamas attacked Israel. Hezbollah is also involved as well. They are incorrectly stating that this land is Palestine. It never was a sovereign state called Palestine. It was owned by the UN. The UN gave the land back to the Jews. The land was taken in the very early eras of settlement in that area, I guess you would call it, by the Romans. It was called Judea and Samaria, and then it was given to what are now, I guess, considered the Palestinians, and then they changed the name to Palestine. The Romans did themselves in spite of the Jews. That's historically what has happened and transpired over the years. And now they're still claiming, the Zionist regime, this, that, the other thing, whatever. There's been many peace deal attempts by Israel to give pieces of land to the West Bank, Gaza Strip, And every single time they attempt to, it always gets turned down because they just want full-fledged war. They want eradication of Jews in the region. That's all that they want. So, next, Trump suspended for another 2 years from Facebook. This is great. The post-millennial piece. And I thought this was kind of interesting because if you look 2 years from now, Trump, if he were to run, he would still it'd be like kind of perfect timing. He'd get right back on Facebook. He'd come out and he'd announce that he's running for president again. Not that I'm a huge fan of that idea, just because he'll be so old. I'd much rather have Ron DeSantis if I had to pick between the two, just because of part of the reason is the age factor. I think DeSantis is a little bit more calculated. I would like to see Trump in some sort of a role. I'd like to see him in a vice president role, because I just like seeing him shoot from the hip and just talk trash the whole time. That's just me personally. I know some of you listening are probably hardcore, diehard Trumpers, but that's just me personally. Now, Facebook decided to hand him a 2-year ban, and this is what Trump had to say about it. Facebook's ruling is an insult to the record-setting 75 million plus and many others who voted for us in the 2020 rigged presidential election. They shouldn't be allowed to get away with this censoring and silencing, and ultimately, we will win. Our country can't take this abuse anymore. So that's what Trump had to say. And then Facebook actually came out super hard, ridiculously hard. I personally think a little bit overdramatic, over the top. As you all know, I think it's ridiculous anyway that he's even banned to begin with. But they said their oversight board came out that decided to, because of the violence at the Capitol on January 6th, where no one actually died from any violence except for a Capitol police officer shooting an unarmed protester. So they said it was not appropriate for Facebook to impose the indeterminate and standardless penalty of indefinite suspension. So now they have this new enforcement protocol just for President Trump that they came out with, and now it's going to be applied in exceptional cases such as this, and we are confirming the time-bound penalty consistent with those protocols, which we are applying to Mr. Trump's accounts, is what Facebook had to say about the decision. Given the gravity and the circumstances that led to Mr. Trump's suspension, we believe his actions constitute a severe violation of our rules, which merit the highest penalty available under the new enforcement protocols. So we are suspending his account for 2 years, effective from the date of the initial suspension on January 7th this year. Oh, and then this is great. At the end of the 2-year period, Facebook said that it would reach whether the risk to the public safety has receded. So they have to reassess it. So it actually may be longer than a suspension of 2 years. If they see Trump as an actual threat to run for the presidency again, what they'll do is they'll probably just continue to suspend him. So it's not even a real it's an indefinite suspension once again at this point. And then it goes on to continue talking about, lifting it. There's a strict set of rapidly escalating sanctions that if we trigger Trump, there'll be if he commits further violations in the future. There's all these stupid rules, and really at this point, Trump should just come out. I know he's been working on his own social media platform. At this point, he should just come out with it, because I think we're all kind of sick of these rules, this weird cutesy, like, PC culture thing that's going on. I'm born in the 90s. I grew up I was in high school probably a couple years before this stuff started to come out, and I'm personally tired of it, so I can only imagine how boomers or older people how they feel about it, just because we reject PC culture entirely. I'm not a fan of it. I thought things were cool. I have conversations with black people, Hispanic people, Asian people, everybody that I went to school with, and there's certain people that are super touchy about things, and they're like, it's almost like, what happened to you in this time frame? And then there's other people that are exactly the same, and they'll say the same thing to me. They'll be like, this is ridiculous. We used to all just chill. We used to all be cool back in school. We used to be vibing. Everything was fine. And now suddenly it's just, it is tumultuous, and everybody hates each other based on race or ideology, or it's really much more political affiliation, I think, that people hate each other over now, especially in America. But I have these more disappointing numbers, job numbers, post-millennial piece. Joe Biden's job numbers are just terrible. Last month, we know that he missed the number by almost 1 million jobs. I think they were assuming there was going to be 1.2 million jobs added, and at the end of the month, it only ended up being in April 200,000 jobs. So they missed the mark by about an entire million, which is a lot. It's substantial. They missed the mark by like 80%. In this case, President Joe Biden spoke on Friday after the release of April's jobs numbers. The Bureau, I guess those were the March jobs numbers. These are the April job numbers now. The Bureau of Labor Statistics released the April numbers showing that employment rose by 559,000 in May. Though this was about 100,000 less jobs than economists had predicted, the estimate was for 671,000 jobs. So he missed the mark by about 110,000 jobs, which isn't crazy substantial. It's much more like a 15% loss. But what I think is more importantly and more telling is we're going to listen to what Biden has to say about this. Play clip 2.
America is finally on the move again. As we continue this recovery, we're going to hit some bumps along the way. Of course that'll happen. We can't reboot the world's largest economy like flipping on a nice light switch. There's going to be ups and downs in jobs and economic reports, but we're going to be supply chain issues and price pressures on the way back to stability and steady growth. In the coming weeks, my administration is going to take steps to combat these supply constraints, building on the work we're doing on the computer chips. That is, we're providing more computer chips to be manufactured here in the United States so it doesn't slow up the manufacturing of automobiles, for example. Everyone needs to get their shots, though. Now's the time to accelerate the process we've been making. Now's the time to build on the foundation we've laid. Because while our progress is undeniable, it is not assured. That's why I propose the American Jobs Plan and the Americans Family Plan. For generational investments, we need to make those investments today to be able to continue to succeed tomorrow.
It goes on for about another 20, 30 seconds, but I try to cut it down, give you the gist of everything. First off, at the very end, hear Biden say, we need to invest for generations to come. We don't invest anything through government. The government is a net loser for us always. They don't create or generate any wealth for the future. So we're just giving money now to the government for them to waste, and then for the kids in the future to actually have to pay off. That's what's consistently been going on this entire time. The government doesn't add anything. Once again, they don't add any value to the economy, any wealth to the economy. That's usually done through the private sector. He's talking about these chips and how the government's going to help these chips be built. They're not going to help anything be built. Right now, he's lying. The numbers in the very beginning where he talks about actually them ramping up, how there's going to be these there's going to be these adjustments, and they're going to make sure that we flow right back in. The fact of the matter is, folks, we're going to see a recession over these next couple of years, especially the way the government's printing money right now. Them keeping the interest rates low are not going to help us. It's all inflationary in nature. They're printing money like we've never seen before, and in them doing this, it is actively defunding your bank account, which is why, once again, this is not financial advice. I tell everybody to invest in whatever you think will hold value, whether you think it's Bitcoin, whether you think it's gold, silver, whatever in the stock market you think will hold value for you. You're much better off putting your money in a product that isn't consistently, unfortunately, once again, stocks are somewhat pegged to the dollar bill, so they will inflate with the dollar bill, but at least you'll inflate in value to, well, the value will stay the same really as the dollar inflates. If you keep your dollar sitting in the bank, the dollar will inflate and your value will become less. Each dollar will mean less in value. Like I said, we're printing money at crazy amounts. And I have this article from the Foundation of Economic Education. It's written by Brad Palumbo. It actually talks about this new phenomenon, which is mentioned in the Washington Post. It's called shrinkflation, which I thought was very interesting. And he thought it as well because he's actually never heard of it before. And in this piece, he goes through to kind of talk about how a crafty way that these companies are adapting to this surge in expenses and due to inflation, as well as everybody being on unemployment, which is why there's all these supply chain issues we're seeing. And then we're also seeing people getting hacked. There was a video of Jen Psaki. They asked her, what do you think? I think it was a hack in meat production, like beef production, from another apparently a Russian hacking group. And she goes, well, that's private industry. So we need to really just make that clear. It's private industry. So it's really their problem. Yeah, that sounds good. But what happens when the entire livestock is affected in this country by Russian hacking groups because the government didn't care about it, and then the supply chain shut down to the point where no one can get food and we all starve to death. What happens then? Is that the government's concern then? Do you guys care about it then? Or, I mean, these are national security issues. The reason that companies, there is some sort of a stability that companies have from coming to the United States and holding their jobs there. The point is the government, one of your very few jobs is to protect life, liberty, and property. Property, your business, is to be protected by the government. So if you run a bit, that's like saying this is the way to explain this the best way I can. If you walk in, if you work at, let's say, a convenience store, you own a convenience store, someone comes in, they rob the convenience store. You go to the cops, you say, hey, listen, I got robbed, like, you know, can you guys somehow get some sort of a, more patrols come around this area? And they say, well, you're a private business owner, right? That's your problem, you got to figure it out. That's the answer that she's giving them. She's essentially giving them the answer of, oh, we're a private industry, you guys figure it out. I understand private industries, yeah, I'm sure you guys are supposed to have your own cybersecurity system, or something like that, something of that nature. You can't tell me with the government, with the crazy budget that they run every single year, you guys don't have a little bit of manpower to put into this one project that is affecting the supply chain of all of our beef throughout the entire country. You guys don't have you have nothing for that. You have no personnel to put on that. I find that very hard to believe. And it's just anything hands up approach right now with the Democrats. Nothing's their responsibility, but when they run for the presidency, everything's the government's responsibility. They want the government involved in everyone's life. But when it comes to actually taking personal responsibility when something happens and you do nothing about it, then it's hands off. Oh no, they're private businesses, they're private industry, they do whatever they want. It really is, it's amazing. So, once again, these countries, they're trying to find, or these companies rather, they're trying to find a crafty way to adapt to the surge of inflation. But it's more than a novel business trend worth noting. It's yet more evidence that when policymakers make decisions that ultimately cause inflation, it hurts everyday citizens and their wallets in thousands of small ways. Each instance of paying 2% more for something or getting 5% less may pass without notice, but overall, you're quietly getting poorer. Shrinkflation just puts a name to this ongoing reality. So let me explain, because I don't think I got the screenshot. He's saying that you're having some companies to compensate for the loss that they're now getting because of inflation rates, because the inflation rates are causing them to pay more money for the goods to produce their product. What they'll do is, if it's toilet paper, for example, let's say they give you 16 ounces of toilet paper for $1. What they're doing now is they'll give you 12 ounces of toilet paper for that same $1. So that's why it's called shrinkflation. You're shrinking the amount of product that you're getting, the person is buying, and you're still paying the same price. It's really just another form of inflation, but it's much more hidden than it would be just to cause, because otherwise then customers would be pissed and they wouldn't go back and buy that product. It's just a way to kind of hide the inflation. So it's important to remember, and this is the most important part of this article, and it is I can't even believe that this is true right here. It's important to remember that the current increases in inflation are directly attributable to policy changes the federal government has made. Rather than pay for their multi-trillion-dollar stimulus spending in full with taxes, so they haven't paid it in full with taxes, politicians have opted to have the government simply print more money to pay for it all. This ultimately leads to indirect taxation of us all through inflation. So, FEE, Foundation of Economic Education, economist Peter Jacobson explains this, and he states, and I quote, nearly one fourth, 25% of the money in circulation has been created since January 2020. So we've never printed money at this rate. We have 1/4 of all money right now in our economy has been printed within the last year. So, but printing more money doesn't mean we actually have more stuff. And if more dollars chase the exact same amount of goods, prices will rise. So if the value of those goods stay the same and you guys continue to print more money, then that just means that the prices will rise because the dollar is devaluing. It is losing its value because you need products to soak up that that money that's being printed. I just cannot believe that a quarter of our money right now in circulation has been printed within the last year. That's how blown up our economy right now is. And it's a giant bubble, and it is getting ready to pop. It really is. It's insane. So what I have a couple of, before I hit my quick headlines, some cultural influences, cultural segment of the show. Highschooler valedictorian Paxton Smith. She graduated high school in Texas. And just listen a little bit to what she had to say for her graduation speech. Play 3.
Dreams and hopes and ambitions. Every girl graduating today does. And we have spent our entire lives working towards our future. And without our input and without our consent, our control over that future has been stripped away from us. I am terrified that if my contraceptives fail, I am terrified that if I am raped, then my hopes and aspirations and dreams and efforts for my future will no longer matter. I hope that you can feel how gut-wrenching that is. I hope you can feel how dehumanizing it is to have the autonomy over your own body taken away from you. And I cannot give up this platform to promote complacency and peace when there is a war on my body and a war on my rights. A war on the rights of your mothers, a war on the rights of your sisters, a war on the rights of your daughters. We cannot stay silent.
So you know what? The story goes that there was a planned speech, and she pretty much scrapped the entire speech, and she went forward with this. It is sad that our society has affected young girls to think that if you are pregnant, your life is over. Your aspirations of anything are over, your life is over, and that's it for you. You might as well pack it in for the rest of your life. You can never achieve anything other than being a mother at that point, which is a good thing to achieve. To be a mother is a great thing. I'm not diminishing that in any way, but our society has tricked young girls and women into thinking that being a mother is like the worst thing in the world that you can possibly be, and it shuts down all opportunity for you in the future, in the near future, which is not the case. There's a lot of strong women that are mothers that have great jobs. This is just a lie. I actually know many of them. I'm not going to state them, but I know many of them, and I think it's very interesting the way that the left finds ways to kind of legitimize this argument, and it's sad that I had this actually happen when I went to my sister's graduation. She's older than I am, but I went to my sister's graduation. I wasn't involved in politics. I was a young kid. I was, like sophomore in high school. And I sat through this, and this kid named Richard E. Bright, which isn't the same Richard E. Bright that keeps getting quoted in these big time, talking about Fauci criticizing him. It's not that same guy. The guy's name's Richard E. Bright, super smart dude, went to Harvard, perfect GPA, whatever, perfect everything, SAT score as well. He went up there and he made a giant political speech as well for the Democrat Party. He shilled for the Democrat Party on his graduation, which is pathetic. Once again, these are all things no one comes to hear about your politics, especially as a 17, 18-year-old kid. No one cares what you have to say about politics. And I'm sure he's still a far leftist today, because going to college just indoctrinates you further into being a far leftist, and this is coming from a guy that went to college as well. But I've experienced this myself, and it is probably, I don't want to call it appalling, but it's almost like just sit down, no one cares what you have to say. when a kid goes up there and says it, and me as a kid watching him say it, and I'm looking at my parents are like, really? You had to go out there and make a political statement on his graduation? Like, you have nothing, you're that much of a social outcast, you have nothing better to do, that this is what you decided to do, you made this your voice. But yeah, the left continues to make this acceptable, telling young girls really to be helpless. This is essentially telling them to be helpless in this case. And once again, the whole body autonomy thing, this is a separate person with separate DNA cells, a complete different chromosomal structure. This is not you. This is not an extension of you. This is not like you saying, I want to chop my arm off, and you chop your arm off. This is you saying, oh, I want to kill something because of my future. How pathetic is that? You're willing to kill another human being because you think that it will make your future more prosperous, which it is just, it's cowardly. It's cowardice. There's no other good way to characterize or illustrate what it is, other than cowardice. So next, I have this other video from Kyrie Irving. Recently, he was leaving the stadium. It was a playoff basketball game. I think he was playing the Celtics, and he's on the Nets. I don't really watch much basketball anymore. Their ratings have tanked about 40% ever since they came out with the whole woke thing. He had a bottle thrown at him from the stands as he was leaving the stadium, going back to the locker room. And this is him in his post-game, what he had to say about it. Play 9.
Obviously, there's been a lot of conversation about fan interaction with players, and then there's an instance tonight. I'm just wondering what you think can be done to prevent these interactions from happening in the future.
It's unfortunate, that sports has come to a lot of this, kind of crossroads where you're seeing a lot of old ways come up. It's been part of that. It's been that way in history in terms of entertainment, performers, and sports for a long period of time, and just underlying racism and just treating people like they're in a human zoo. Throwing stuff at people, saying things. There's a certain point where it just gets to be too much.
I think it's important we kind of get into these cultural battles now. In the very beginning of this podcast, at the inception, I didn't think so, and now I'm noticing that is what is lacking in our mainstream. That's what's lacking in the Fox Newses of the world. They avoid these cultural issues. So first things first, if somebody's racist, they believe that one race is superior to others. That is the right-wing definition. The left-wing definition is a bunch of different things that can't be proven whether or not you're racist. The reason for it is to keep it subjective, so then you can kind of turn around and you can espouse and you can call somebody racist with no validity and no foundation to the argument, to that claim. To be racist, you have to think that one race is above the other. Okay, so in the NBA, which is predominantly black players, populated by predominantly black players, I'd probably say, if I had to guess, maybe around 85 to 90% black players in the NBA. If you are a white supremacist racist, why would you show up to an NBA game to support black players? It is antithetical to what you would believe in as a white supremacist racist. You don't want to give money. You don't want these people to make more money if you're a white supremacist racist. Why would you go to an NBA game if you were racist? You are paying, let's say $100 a ticket. That goes to pay the players for their salary. This is a normal. This has been normal for a long time. People throwing stuff at players, whether it's food, tomatoes, beverages, beer. This has happened for years. This has happened for a long time. You had the Ron Artest. You had the brawl in I think it was the Detroit Pistons versus the Indiana Pacers, I want to say, and it was the brawl in I think it was in Detroit when Ron Artest ran up to the stands and started swinging on random fans because they were throwing stuff and yelling stuff from the bleachers. I mean, this is normalized. Now the last couple of years it really hasn't been as normal, but this was always going on in sports. This isn't just a sudden occurrence and we're seeing racism from the 1960s and 1921 and when they burned down the that's just not the case, folks. This is just the way sports are. There's idiots. People get drunk. They do stupid crap when they go to sporting events. It's just the way it is, unfortunately. But to call it because it's racist, that could have been... he's only calling it racist because he sees that the guy that they arrested was a white dude. Simply put, that's the way it goes. And that's why the NBA is losing ratings. It's why they're down about 30-40% in the ratings, because no one wants to watch them because all they're about is cultural Marxism. So to get to a couple of my quick headlines here... I have a lot of them, actually. A woman who promoted DeSantis conspiracy theories announces a run for governor. This woman was saying that Ron DeSantis was misreporting the numbers. And then she was releasing information that wasn't supposed to be public information. It was confidential information in the government. So then her house, somebody came, I think a couple government officials or a couple law enforcement officers came to her house, arrested her. She kept screaming about how they had guns pointed at her kids. Then you had some body cam footage came out. Wasn't the truth. She's lying. She's also known to have the woman's absolutely, she's out of her mind, crazy. I think she was like messing around with on her husband with like these young kids. I mean, she has a bunch of things wrong with her. She was going to therapy many times. I think she tried to commit suicide. She had eating disorders and whatever. So she was crazy. She pretty much made up all these stories about Ron DeSantis. Now she's going to be running for governor over in Florida. I don't see it lasting long. So Biden administration suspends more oil leases in Alaska. So you've recently seen, I've actually have not reported on this yet until now. They approved a pipeline over in Russia with the help of Joe Biden, as he has shut down all the pipelines here in the United States. And now he's going to suspend more oil leases in Alaska because they wanted to drill in Alaska as well, get some oil from there. But now he's going to also additionally decide to suspend that also. So Fast and Furious 9 gets destroyed in the box office. This is a Breitbart news piece. Right after John Cena goes out, gives his little apology to the Chi-Coms, the Chinese Communist Party, you now see they're predicting their box office by the end of all of this to be 211 million, which you say, oh, wow, that sounds a lot. But comparatively to the last two movies they've had, which have been about 393 and 397 million respectively, they're running about half, 50% of who showed up to their last two movies. So really, they're not doing that well. They've lost almost 50% of their viewership in the box office, even after giving that apology. That's why you don't bend the knee to the Chinese Communist Party. You stand strong for what you believe in. If he came out and he stood strong, you might have seen some patriotic Americans going and watching the movie. So Barack Obama thinks Joe Biden will finish the job. I thought this was interesting. It was talking about how, and it's a Breitbart news piece, Barack Obama thinks that he's going to finish the job in terms of Obamacare. He's going to push for more and more progressive and redistribution of wealth programs like Obamacare. And this is what he exactly had to say in an interview with Ezra Klein, super far leftist. Barack Obama said, I think that what we're seeing now is Joe and the administration are essentially finishing the job. And I think it'll be an interesting test. 90% of the folks who were there in my administration, they are continuing and building on the policies we talked about. So really, this is just a third Obama term. Obama's a commie. He's outright commie. Everyone knows he's a communist. So he's going to continue to do Obama-like things from the back, and he's kind of, I think, running a lot of the show right now. And he wants them to finish the job. He wants them to go through with the full redistribution of wealth system and having many more of these communist-like social safety nets that Obamacare is. And we'll see what ends up happening with that. It's interesting that he feels confident enough to go out there and speak out. And I guess I don't blame him. No one's really talking against him. And if anybody does, they're going to get kicked off Twitter or Facebook. So Biden, and the very last one, Biden blacklists 59 Chinese Communist Party connected tech and communication companies from the New York Stock Exchange. So I talked about this earlier, how he relisted them. And now he's going to blacklist them like Trump did because he went back on what Trump said. And then maybe there's some sort of intelligence agency reports that came out saying that these are bad actors. These are adversaries to the United States. So then he went forward and he blacklisted them again, which is a good thing. This may be one of the best things the Biden administration's done so far that I actually agree with. But other than that, everything's been pretty terrible so far. So that will conclude the show. I greatly appreciate everyone tuning in as always. Please like, share, subscribe, drop the mic, let people know about the podcast. I ran a little bit long, but I tried to get it, 5 or 10 minutes, a little over. But I greatly appreciate everyone as always. I really do for tuning in to the weekend special. We're going to be continuing. We're going to have the Federalist paper podcast Monday, Friday, and then Wednesday as well. Well, Tuesday night going into Wednesday will be the next current event next week. So I greatly appreciate everybody as always, and have a great weekend. Thank you.